Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto, Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. How's everybody doing? I trust everybody's doing just fine. Well, in the house. Oh, we're kind of scarce in the house this morning. Where is everybody? Welcome aboard. Yvette Avery Herod is in the house from Atlanta, Georgia. We have Melanie Keelan in the house from from Barcelona, Spain. We had Yvette Avery Herod from Atlanta, Georgia. And then we had Bridge MCP from Binghamton, New York. Hey, the first three people in the chat are women. Yoo-hoo! I love that. Then followed by Eric Hayes from Atascocita, Kingwood, and I'm awaiting everybody else to sign in and sign up. How are all my peeps doing? Let's go ahead and make sure that all our feeds are up, including Instagram, let's see, is my feed up for Substack? I think the Substack feed should be up as well. Let's make sure all of these things are doing just fine. Folks, let me know. Lee the Bearcat is in here. He says, yo, likewise is, hey, y'all from Lee Grant. And likewise is Bruce Pollard says, looking good, posse. Egberto was super at our Democrats meeting last night. I appreciate that coming from you, brother. That means everything. Let's see. Yeah, it seems like everything is streaming as it should. Everything seemed to be streaming, but I don't seem to pick some of it up on my cell phone. So let me go ahead and make sure all is running as it should. You know, we want to make sure that all our peeps on all our channels are taken good, because as you know, one of our channels that does very well is this great channel that is the Substack. So let's see. Substack, where are you? I don't quite see you yet. That's okay. We'll figure that out in a minute. Anyway, folks, how's it going? Let's see what we got here. Let Bruce. Oh, sold car for gas money. Meow. My YouTube did not work. Well, I hope it's going to work. Now I'm looking at it right now and it seems to be working. Quite a few people on YouTube. We have quite a few people on Twitter. We have quite a few people on the gram, etc. All right, what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go ahead and tell you today we are going to start with Medicaid. I had an interview with a professor out of Georgetown University. I think you guys are going to find this quite informative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start there because I think this is a very important subject we better get handled before the Republicans destroy our healthcare system more so than it is right at this point in time. So with that, let's go ahead and get busy. Welcome to another edition of Politics and Random. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us. Today, we're honored to have Edwin Park. Edwin Park is a researcher, professor at the Georgetown University McCourt School of Public Policy. His work primarily focused on Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, and the Affordable Care Act. And he is considered one of the nation's leading health policy experts on issues related to Medicaid and CHIP financing and the Affordable Care Act's coverage expansions. Among others, he also analyzes tax policies related to healthcare and policies related to drug pricing and private insurance markets. Professor Edwin Park, it's my pleasure to have you on Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Look, I think the work that you are doing here is extremely important. Specifically, I know this is research, apolitical research, but in the political realm, it is extremely important. Tell us a little bit about the study that you did relative to Medicaid and rural areas.
Sure. We looked at data from the U.S. Census Bureau and compared coverage rates, Medicaid and CHIP coverage rates in rural areas and small towns to Medicaid coverage rates in metropolitan areas. And while it's not widely understood, particularly among the public, that Medicaid is a vital lifeline for those living in rural areas and small towns. And one of the findings is that for kids and non-elderly adults, these are adults under age 65, Medicaid coverage rates were higher than they were in metropolitan areas nationwide. Seniors, it's a little different. It tends to be the case that Medicaid, which picks up nursing home care, help with Medicare premiums and cost sharing, those coverage rates are higher in metropolitan areas than in rural areas. In 29 states, seniors in rural areas are more likely to have Medicaid than those in metro areas. So clearly demonstrates the vital importance of Medicaid in rural areas and small towns, and particularly for rural hospitals and other providers in these communities. Often they're a single provider in these communities. If a large share of their patients are covered by Medicaid, certainly any change to Medicaid could have a dramatic effect on their ability to keep their doors open and provide the services that their rural communities need.
Now, let's get a few things straight for the audience, because a lot of people don't quite understand. First of all, how is Medicare paid for? I'm sorry, Medicaid paid for? In other words, what's the mechanism that we have with Medicaid and how it gets to different communities?
So Medicaid is what's called a federal-state financial partnership. So the federal government pays for a portion of Medicaid costs, and states are responsible for the rest. On average, the federal government picks up roughly 60% or so of the costs of Medicaid, but it depends on the kind of groups covered, the kind of services covered. Those matching rates can vary, and it varies by state as well. But it is the case where the federal government pays for the majority of Medicaid costs and states are responsible for the rest. So if federal funding is changed, reduced, that means states are on the hook for picking up the difference and kicking in more of their own funding than compared to what they do now.
Now, as it stands, if I remember correctly, let's bring a little bit of the Medicaid expansion, the Affordable Care Act into the picture. The Affordable Care Act had a piece called the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act. How does that compare to someone on basic Medicaid?
So the Medicaid expansion was something that was part of the Affordable Care Act. It covers nearly 21 million people today in 40 states, plus the District of Columbia. Under current law, the federal government picks up 90% of the cost of the expansion. So states are only responsible for 1 in 10 of the cost of the expansion, and it's a vital form of coverage for parents and other non-elderly adults, including some people with disabilities who otherwise weren't eligible for Medicaid. They had incomes too high for Medicaid prior to the Affordable Care Act, but too low for coverage through the new Affordable Care Act marketplaces. And this is, a key factor in terms of why non-elderly adults in rural communities tend to be more likely to have Medicaid. It's because of the Medicaid expansion, in large part because of the fact that adults in rural communities have less access to commercial insurance, other sources of coverage. And so the Medicaid expansion was a lifeline for them, their families, as well as to the rural hospitals that serve them.
Now, and let me see if I can qualify this. Traditional Medicaid is a different program than the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act. Yes, or is that true, or?
No, they're all part of the same Medicaid program. So previous to the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid was primarily about covering children, their parents, seniors, and people with disabilities.
Below a level.
For parents, their incomes, they were generally covered around 60% of the poverty level prior to the Affordable Care Act. The Medicaid expansion provided a coverage option for parents up to 138% of the federal poverty level, as well as elderly, non-disabled adults without kids, and that's what is covering nearly 21 million people. But it's all part of the same Medicaid program. Mm-hmm. It's just a new coverage group that the Affordable Care Act provided, and it was a huge contributor to the improvements in health coverage nationwide since the Affordable Care Act was enacted.
Now, so the proposed cuts that Republicans are considering for Medicaid, does that mean that it'll affect all of Medicaid, meaning both the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act and those who are just simply on Medicaid?
Yes. So the Medicaid cut proposals that are currently being considered by House Republicans in particular. There was a document leaked last week that included a list of Medicaid cuts. They include a number of different cuts related to Medicaid financing. Many of them reduce federal funding for state Medicaid programs. One proposal would make it harder for states to finance their share of the cost of Medicaid. But they all have the same effect, which is reducing the amount of funding available for Medicaid. And as a result, states will have no choice but to slash their Medicaid programs in response.
Because it's clear that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, one of the proposals, for example, would cap federal funding for the entire Medicaid program. So it's not just the Medicaid expansion. And by dramatically reducing federal funding, that means states will be making cuts across the Medicaid program. And so it's not just the expansion. It could be to kids, people with disabilities. It could be seniors in nursing homes. There's a whole host of possible cuts they would have to make, but it'd be across the entire program. One of the proposals is specifically targeted towards the Medicaid expansion, and that would dramatically lower the share of costs picked up by the federal government related to the expansion. That would shift costs to states, and as a result, some states would immediately have to turn off their expansions. Other states would be unable to sustain it over the long run, and as a result, those who gain coverage under the expansion would drop it. But these cuts affect the entire Medicaid program. Kids, their parents, seniors, people with disabilities, other adults, including adults who gain coverage through the expansion, they all would be negatively affected by the kind of draconian cuts that are being considered today.
Now, let me back out of the actual fact-based numbers and just ask you a human question. If they cut Medicare, what are the people who cannot qualify to do? What are they to do?
Oh, so if someone loses their health coverage or their coverage for long-term services and supports, Medicaid, plays such a vital role. It's very likely they will end up uninsured. And we know for a fact that those who are uninsured forego needed care. They have poorer health outcomes. They're more likely to be in a precarious financial state because they have medical debt, unpaid medical bills. And this could have huge negative effects in the short term, but also could have very harmful effects over the long run. Research shows, for example, that Medicaid coverage in childhood leads to better health, less incidence of disability in adulthood, higher educational attainment, finishing high school, going on to college, graduating from college, greater financial stability, higher incomes in adulthood as well. And so the converse is, if you're uninsured, if a child who would otherwise have been covered by Medicaid but is uninsured because of the potential cuts that are being considered, they would have poor life outcomes as a result. So their future outcomes would be worse, and societies would be in a poorer state, a worse state as a result, if Medicaid coverage is lost for kids. So it gives you an example about the effects that will have on people's lives if they don't have the health coverage that they do today because of some of these cuts that are being considered.
As a professor, it is imperative that it is expressed in that way. I understand, but simply put, I'd like to tell our audience here, in effect, what these cuts that are being proposed by the new Republican Congress, in effect, will kill. The professor has just stated how, but these things will kill because people will go without health care and they will die. Professor, rural areas are more dependent on both Medicaid and the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act. Hospitals around the country have been closing because they are dependent on being funded, given that, as you stated, many people in rural areas are dependent on Medicaid and the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care. And thus, if they are not seeking care locally, those hospitals close. Are these things that policymakers, through information provided by professors and studies that you've run, are these things getting, first of all, to the people that need to hear it in Congress? And secondly, how much publicity are we ensuring the average American citizen know about this, given that this is something that directly affects your lives? And if it goes through, it's hell getting it back.
Yeah, I think there unfortunately has not been a public debate about the future of Medicaid and what these kind of cuts would mean for everyday Americans, not just including those in rural areas and small towns. There wasn't any discussion of Medicaid in the campaign in the run-up to the November elections. There have been no public debate about Medicaid cuts since then. And right now, largely behind closed doors, there's discussions of these kind of draconian Medicaid cuts. This was not a factor that was considered by voters, and is largely, passing under the radar. But these cuts would affect the more than 70 million people on the Medicaid program today, including those in rural communities. And, it's very, very critical that people understand the value of Medicaid, all the roles Medicaid plays. It covers more than 60% of nursing home residents, 40% of births, about 40% of kids. It is the primary funder of mental health services in the country, the primary funder of treatment for substance use disorders, including opioid addiction. And as a result, these cuts would have a huge impact across the U.S. healthcare system. And so, there should be a full and open debate about the merits of these Medicaid cuts and their likely effect across, a whole host of Americans, those in rural communities and small towns, kids, seniors, people with disabilities, other adults, that should all be discussed before going ahead with the kind of really massive, damaging cuts that are being proposed that would cause Medicaid programs to be slashed across the country. For example, the cuts being considered total up to $2.3 trillion, according to House Republicans. That's a cut in federal funding of roughly a third over the next 10 years. And it's hard to see how states can compensate for that without having to really gut their Medicaid programs. And that means many fewer people without health coverage, without access to the services they need, including nursing home and other long-term services and supports. The
fact is that states could not recover that money at all. I mean, as it is right now, they're trying to make cuts themselves in healthcare. Now, it seems to me, if we look at the outcomes relative to the OECD, it seems like America shouldn't be cutting Medicaid expansion, but actually increase our Medicaid in general or in the aggregate. It should actually be increasing the amount that it's funded, and we're going in the completely opposite direction, which doubles on the issue. Well, I'm glad that you came on here to point these out. And I usually have one last question that pretty much says the same. What should I have asked you? What do I need to know that I didn't ask you or that our audience need to know?
Medicaid is important form of coverage for so many Americans, and particularly in rural areas and small towns. And any policy change that could adversely affect that coverage will have a huge negative impact. And I hope that people will raise the value of Medicaid, the importance of Medicaid, so that policymakers think twice before going ahead with the kind of really damaging cuts that are being contemplated that could really take away coverage from tens of millions of low-income kids, seniors, people with disabilities, and other adults, including their parents.
Professor Edwin Park, research professor at the Georgetown University McCourt School of Public Policy. Your work is very important. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. This is something that America needs to hear.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that. That was some very important information. Wow, it is great to see some great commentary. Bruce, this part of Medicare that he's talking about covers the entire country. It's what the federal government gives as block grants to all states, not block grants. It's the states bill the federal government for Medicare. Now, if the states also accept Medicare and Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act, people at a higher level of income qualifies for healthcare under Medicaid. As it is in Texas, they don't. So those people that are in the middle, that they make too much to get Medicaid, but they make too little to get to afford health insurance, they simply die. Or if they don't die, they get sicker. Or if they don't get, it is just a horrendous case here in Texas, because the money is there, but we have to decide to accept that money. And of course, there are some rules that apply. The federal government pays 90% and the state pays 10%. As it is right now, the state just let these people die, or let the emergency room takes care of them, which is more expensive to the state as well. And also, it closes hospitals, it reduces workflow. The entire thing costs Texas more money just to keep their idealistic, evil way of being. Just to say, we are not going to give anything. We prefer people to die. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Bridge MCP has an important meme that she wants me to show you. This is a very important meme because it's not the only one with regards to Greg Abbott. I want you to see this. Greg Abbott is the governor in a wheelchair. We feel for him. But this guy, as opposed to realizing that he was a recipient of DEI from the time that tree took him out, he was a recipient of DEI. And what is he? Talking about cutting all DEI programs. But it's not that alone that this criminal was responsible for. When this guy got hit by the tree, he got rewarded a stipend for life. And not only a stipend for life, but he also got a lump sum, I don't remember how many $1 million, for that tree that accidentally fell on him. But it goes further. And what did he do as payment to everybody else that would have gone through what he has gone through? This evil being, this evil character now took away the right of other people that got injured the way he got injured to be able to sue the way he sued. This evil character says it's good for me, but it's not good enough for you. That is how these people think. Elon Musk wants to cut USAID because they're overspending here and there. But he doesn't talk about the overspending that goes on in his rocket manufacturer, in his electric car manufacturer, in his Starlink manufacturer that the government pays for. These sleazy guys, they take. It's for me, it's for me, it's for me. But the other folks, they get zilch. I am not into wasting government money, but it's hypocritical for these pieces of trash. And that's how I refer to these types of politicians, pieces of trash, to go out there and do what they do. And we must start using the proper adjectives that refer to these guys, because you have to have an evil sensibility. You have to be evil to do what these guys do. They took advantage of the system, and people that just want the system to work for them. People that are just saying, let the system work for me, Mr. Abbott, Mr. Criminal. Let the system give me Medicare, or rather the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care, so that my child can get child care, so that my mother who is sick doesn't make enough. Just let them be able to see a doctor. Governor, you claim to be a Christian, Governor, but you let your citizens die. Why, Governor? Why are you so criminally insane, Governor? And you look at all the red states. They all take more from the government than they put into the government, minus likely one. Texas is just about even because of the amount of oil it produces, the amount of wind energy that it produces. Texas is just a very rich state. But still, as rich as it is, it treats its middle class and poor like trash. And unfortunately, because of bad media coverage, because of a horrendous way in which we cover the news here, most of the rural areas don't know the evil that these guys represent. Well, you know what? With Politics Done Right and other networks, we intend to not forget about our brothers and sisters in rural areas as these criminals, as these thugs, as these evil people do what they do to them. We don't ever intend to give in. That is why when Fareed Zakaria said maybe Democrats should just say to hell with the working class and just go ahead and support the make your base be the educated minorities and women, etc., because that's the majority of the country. Work on those and forget about the working class. To which I say, hell no. We support everybody. The Progressive Party should be a 70 to 80% party of this country. In other words, we should have 80% of the people. We should have many in the wealthy class. We should have all of the working class. We should have all of the women. We should have all of the minorities. Just about all. Because we are the ones who represent morality, their values, and humanity. These guys simply represent evil. And I do not say this mincing my words. I mean that from the depths of my heart. Anybody who can see people suffer, like the Texans without health insurance, knowing there's a solution and still not provide it, that's an evil person. And we need to call it out the way it really is. They are evil. And they need to know it. And those evangelical preachers who support them, and those evangelical preachers who follow the same path that these guys follows, are just as evil, if not worse, because they should know better. They know what Jesus said. Whether you're a Christian or not, Jesus has a history. It's amazing and it's sad. Anyhow, USAID gets food for exactly. I love that you found that out, Bridge. By cutting USAID, many farmers have their grain, their peanut butter, and all these things shipped to other countries directly through USAID. There is no mechanism to do it without USAID. In fact, USAID is the mechanism that does it. Thank you for pointing that out. Now, as well, Paul Fleming, thank you for bringing that up on the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal Authority has refuted U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, asserting that a deal was made to allow U.S. government vessels to transit the canal without fees, clarifying that no such agreement exists and that the established fee structure remains unchanged. Again, Donald Trump tried all this crap about tariff on Canada, tariff on Mexico, and he tries to make believe like he won something. He failed. And the reason he failed is that the problem is not a Canadian problem. The problem is not a Mexican problem. The problem is an American problem. Same with Panama. But you know what they're doing? They're pushing, now that Canada understands that loyalty to America now means loyalty to Trump, and that loyalty to Trump means nothing in return, they're starting to open talks with China. That is what Canada has reopened. Okay? And all these other countries are going to start to diversify their markets as opposed to simply sticking with the easy market of the United States that is right next door. Free trade between these three countries would have been great to just maintain it that way. It's so much easier. Cross the border by land, no problem. But you elected a dummy. You elected a bloviating buffoon. And in doing so, you put all our lives at risk, all our personal economies at risk. MAGA, I hope you're happy because it's not over yet. Because when I told you that their policies will affect you more than it affect those of us who are progressives, because in the aggregate, progressives are wealthier. Even poor progressives in the aggregate are wealthier than MAGA. Okay? So, MAGA are the ones that are perpetually dependent on the government. They're dependent on their government for healthcare. They're dependent on their government for food stamps. They're dependent on the government to keep their streets paved. Because your government chose not to charge right kind of interest to attract freeloaders from around the country. People say, well, why are people moving to Texas? Hey, because if I move to Texas, my money goes further. I can make my money in California. I can make my money in New York. I can make my money in Connecticut. I can make my money in Oregon. I can make my money in Washington. And then when it is time for me to retire or make that money go further, I just come to Texas or I go to Alabama and I live like a king. I live like a king in those places. While the original Texans, the original Alabamians, the original Louisianans, all these originals from the red states, they are my slaves. You get it? So anytime somebody says, why are people moving to the red states? Because you're going to be slave to them. You're going to be slave to, they're not giving up their ideology. They're just going to use you for what you've allowed the Republicans to do to you. Turn you into slaves. Okay, let's see. Paul Fleming says, Rubio actually sent a letter to Biden asking him to increase the USAID budget to counter Chinese influence. CNN busts Trump Secretary of State Marco Rubio for being a huge USAID advocate before joining Musk and Trump in attacking it. It is sad. These guys have no character, no moral center. But again, that's what, anytime you touch Trump, anytime you get close to Trump, every time you work with Trump, you lose your values, you lose your man or womanhood, you lose your character, you lose your soul. That's the reality. Patrick Magner says conservatives want white people to have more children, but they're defunding the very system that makes it possible for 90% to have them. Nobody ever said that they had a lot upstairs. Nobody ever said that. Trump's acting CFPB director, Scott Benson, stopped the agency's work, which includes capping credit card rates and excessive fees, penalizing banks for ripping off consumers, preventing politically motivated debanking. It's a victory for Wall Street at your expense. And again, at MAGA, you are the guys paying 25% interest on your credit cards. You are the guys who, every time you're late for 5 minutes on your credit card, they throw a $35 to $50 charge on you. And all those protections that the Democrats gave you guys that says we are going to help out the working class. We are going to help them out. You guys says, give me Trump. Well, you got Trump, all right. Fafo, F around and find out. Well, it seems like many are finding out now. Okay, AVQ says, getting in the way late, out shopping, completely lost track of time. How could you, my dear brother Rodnan? How could you be late to politics done right? I love you, man. I love you. Let's see what else we got here. Paul Fleming says, Toronto, $83 million cocaine bust. These drugs travel all the way from Mexico over the United States southern border, then made their way to Canada. Let me get this straight. The drugs went from the U.S. into Canada, not from Canada into the U.S. Right. Maybe Canada needs to put up a wall. Maybe they need to put up a wall. Maybe. I don't know. I saw somebody put something about Venezuela in here. I can't find it. Let's see if I can find that thing about Venezuela. Because I want to read that. That's another FAFO moment, right? Let's go to Venezuela. Paul Fleming, here it goes. Venezuelan in South Florida feel betrayed that Trump broke his campaign promise not to deport documented immigrants with temporary protected status. Miami-Dade County is 69% Hispanic, but Trump won the county by 10 points in November. We tried to warn them. You see, but I warned the Democrats as well. In Miami, they had all these Spanish commercials on, playing to the sensibilities of communism and all this kind of stuff. And instead of none of that $1.2 billion was spent appropriately in Florida to really do the work of getting to the grassroots of the people. So they made a bad decision. They didn't realize that they didn't know the history of Trump. They didn't know how crooked he was. But you know what? To which I tell my Venezuelan brothers and sisters, c'est la vie. Go home. You go home. Those of us who were offering you a welcome hand and saying, come, we love you. You decided to turn on the folks who cared about you. And you decided to support somebody we told you would harm you. And to which we say now, c'est la vie. Have a good life with Mr. Maduro. Maduro may throw you in jail when you get back, but Trump doesn't care, nor should we care going forward. All right, Trump dumped these farmers water, and they chose and have to talk about it. California farmers, some of President Donald Trump's staunchest supporters in the deep blue state, are sticking with him even after he wasted more than 2 billion gallons of their water. Something, and they choose and talk about it. It is shameful, but you know what? FAFO, remember those words, FAFO. All right, what else have we got here? Breed says, Egberto Willies, Gutting USAID threatens billions of dollars for the U.S. farm business. USAID oversees projects such as food aid, disaster relief, and health programs in over 100 countries with a staff of more than 10,000 and a budget of around 40 billion. Billions of those dollars flowed right back into America's economy until President Donald Trump ordered a 90-day freeze on foreign aid spending last month. Now, U.S. business that sold goods and services to USAID are in limbo. That includes American farms, which supply about 41% of the food aid that the agency working with the U.S. Department of Agriculture sends around the world each year, according to 2021 reports by Congressional Research Service. In 2020, the U.S. government bought $2.1 billion in food aid from American farmers. You see, when you're dumb, or when you try to go into a field that you don't know about, like Elon Musk, I always told you guys, Elon Musk doesn't have a lot upstairs. The people that he pay has a lot upstairs, but he personally doesn't have a lot upstairs. So when he goes and tries to go into the field of government, he can't help but being a failure. And, you know, a friend of mine, yesterday, I was at the Democratic Club in Kingwood. I was the featured speaker there last night. And one of my old friends came up and said, I have two daughters. Both of them work for the government. Both of them have been laid off. And both of them did great work in charity, etc. One is with the USAID. The other one is with, I don't remember what section she was with. But she said, it's all frozen. Then I had somebody else come up and say, Egberto, this stuff is having a real effect on people. My son-in-law ain't no progressive Democrat. He had to lay off 10 workers because the job that was being paid for by the grants given by the USAID disappeared. So it has real effects. And, you know, let them keep fooling with these guys because they'll take your well-being away. Joe from LA, welcome aboard. Let's see what else we have here. Tom C says, yep, cut overspending whenever you find it, but don't eliminate the agency if it does more good than not. Some especially goes for the defensive part. Exactly. Bridge MCP says Egberto Willies Rump is going around claiming that he got all the things done that were already done. Stupid. Yep. But you see, Democrats have to put that out all over. The biggest problem Democrats have is they are quiet. You can't have just a politics done right and Eric Schwartz or a few other people out there doing it. Everybody has to be out there telling the truth. Donald Trump is accomplishing absolutely nothing. He's just creating chaos. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Bree says, laughing my you-know-what off, Egberto. Canada is building a wall. I just said that. I had to put that one from Bridge MCP on air. Let's go ahead. Bridge, this is courtesy of Bridge. Breaking news. Canada is building a wall and you're going to pay for it. Wow. I love it. That was a good one, Bridge. That was a good one. All right, let's continue here. Miss Yabi, dismantling the bases is set up for anarchy. They didn't mention any of it because they knew it would scare people. It's like laughing at a bad joke. Missy B, how you doing, Missy B? Wait a minute. First of all, is Missy B Melissa? If this is Melissa, young lady, I've been trying to reach you. Tell me if this is if Missy B is Melissa. Let me know. Okay, let's continue here. Para ver. Michael Radin said, Egberto, Venezuelans voting Trump. People voting for the lepers eating faces party, not realizing the lepers would eat their face. But really, do we blame the voters for their mistakes? In this case, yes. I have a very good Venezuelan friend that he had fallen. He wouldn't say it, but you could see he was falling for the Trump crap. And just recently, I got a note. I have to call him back. A note that said, "Hey, he's starting to sound like Maduro." And all I could do was laugh. It's like, we told you so. All right, guys, I got another video for you. I want you to see this one. This is another important video, and then we can talk about it thereafter. As I see it, there are two types of Christians. those that go out and claim they believe in family values, they believe in aiding the poor. In effect, they believe in doing the things that the good book, the Bible, speak of what Jesus would do. And then they're the ones who simply fake it, and the things that they believe in really is more harmful to humanity than anything else. And this is true for religion proper, the church proper, as well as politics. But you know what is beautiful? What is beautiful is when religion and politics merge to actually do good. Right now in our country, the sect that's controlling most politicians are that sect that do so much harm to humanity, does so much harm to many in the country, the least of us, the ones that Jesus would revere. Well, there is a Texas politician who is studying to be a pastor. Right now, he's a very religious person in his beliefs and believes in doing the good thing. His name is Representative James Talarico. I want you to listen to how he interprets the evil that is putting vouchers in this system. He makes it quite clear. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Greg Abbott is selling this private school voucher scam by calling it school choice. But it's not school choice. It's the school's choice, because private schools can deny admission to any kid for any reason they want. So how is it choice when the private school has all the power? How is it choice when a majority of counties in the state of Texas don't have a single private school in them? How is it choice when private schools don't have to provide transportation or special education services? And how is it choice when the voucher doesn't even cover the full cost at most private schools in Texas? If you gave my former students on the west side of San Antonio a $10,000 voucher, there's still no way they could afford a $20,000 a year private school. But here's the catch. The wealthy parent who is already sending their kid to a $20,000 a year private school is about to get a $10,000 discount, a $10,000 coupon at our expense. Vouchers are welfare for the wealthy. And by taking money out of our public schools and giving it to wealthy parents who don't need it, vouchers would be a massive, historic transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top. And the last thing I'll say, there are a lot of self-proclaimed Christians pushing these voucher scams. I can't think of anything more unchristian than stealing from the poor to give to the rich.
There are many who will criticize his last statement. For those who call themselves Christians and support vouchers, that's one of the least Christian-like things to do. Why? Because it is tantamount to taking food out of the mouth of the poor. It is tantamount to stealing from the poor. It is tantamount to saying, we don't give a darn about you. Even though we could afford it, we still will take from you. Sounds like those who practice our economic system to the extreme, doesn't it? But for those who practice it and claim to be Christians, listen to what James Talarico had to say, someone that we're likely going to be calling Pastor James Talarico, Honorable Representative in 2025.
We spend a lot of time.
Yes, that young man. I think he's only like 34, 35 years old, somewhere around there. But I can't wait for him to run for governor of Texas. I think when he runs with the message that he has, I think he is going to rip it through and become one of the best governors of this state. Because you know what? He has all the right moral cues. And yes, Mr. Eric, I'm going to answer you on this one. Notice I didn't answer the other crap that you put out there, but I'm going to answer this one. Bashing Christians, that's not what we're doing. We're bashing selective Christians. We're bashing the CINO. We're bashing the sinos, Christians in name only. Okay? Because those evangelical preachers that are pushing this, and you can tell them I said that. And you can tell them I'd love to have them on the show for them to tell me what's Christian about what they have been doing, not only with vouchers, but many other things. I declare them evil. I repeat, I declare them evil. If one of them were standing in my face right now, I would say, sir, you are evil and harming Americans. I would say it directly into their faces without biting a word. Okay, Maywood, gonna have to block you. Sorry, I don't want to see the it's Maywood getting into conversations with folks. Yeah, Maywood. Honestly, let me just say this. You can only discuss with somebody who has the ability to think critically. Okay? Do not, when you engage directly, constantly, more than one cycle with someone who has an inability to think critically, you're actually messing with the feed in the way that Bridge MCP is talking about, and really we want to make sure everybody gets here. So don't corrupt the feed with answering stupidity in my humble opinion. All right, let's see what else we got here. Michael Radin says, or rather, Tom. I just saw something from Tom. Tom says, first I got from Michael. He says, Jesus said, feed the poor, heal the sick, love your neighbor, and welcome the immigrant and refugee. Go read Sermon on the Mount again. Again, don't bother engaging these guys. These guys aren't Christians. Bridge got it right. They're Christian extremists, but I don't like the word Christian extremist because it tries to mix a good and a bad. They are white extremists. That's what they are. Okay? Now let's go to let's go to Tom and Tom says, agree, Michael Ruddin, real Christians follow the Beatitudes of Jesus from the Sermon of the Mount. Thank you, Tom C. Tom C. All the Christians I know are left. And there's a reason why. Because the right has usurped conservatism into an evil. It's that simple. The right has usurped conservatism and turned it into an evil. And what I mean by that is conservatism is a valid ideology. I don't agree with it, but it is based on a way of being. Small government, if you can live with what small government means, if I don't agree with that, but you can. But what the extremists have done is usurped conservatism in such a manner that conservatives are conservatives no more. The things that Donald Trump does is not conservative at all. And Republicans would tell you that in silence. They just won't say it aloud. They'll tell you that in silence. Anyway, it is time for us to shut this baby down. So I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank everybody for being here, whether you're left, right, or otherwise. I hope you all listened as we all want to. But before I go, I got to do what I got to do at the end of every program, and that is ask for your support. And you can support our program by going to politicsdoneright.com. First of all, you can become a patron, right? you can go to politicsandright.com/Patreon and find out all the different offers we have when you sign up as a Patreon. Alternatively, you can go ahead and let's say that you want a hard copy of my books. I have 5 books that are currently out, several more on the way. You can go to politicsandright.com/books and get a hard copy of the books. Now, if you want to be a sustaining supporter, it's equivalent to saying, I'm going to give Politics Done Right a coffee a month. And for that coffee a month, I'm going to get a newsletter. Every day I'll learn about the programs. I will have access to all the books that he has currently written and that he is writing. All my future books you get access to while you are a paid subscriber to my newsletter. And also we give you a lot of other perks. You get the complete podcast of all the programs listed nicely with video on the Substack screen and device. And for that, you just have to go to politicsandright.com/newsletter, politicsandright.com/newsletter. And by doing that, you get a chance for all those features. You can also go to my Substack at Egberto at Substack or egberto.substack.com. But either one will get to the place where you can actually subscribe, become a paid subscriber of the Substack. Remember, we don't only write newsletters. We don't only do this show here. We do it at 6 in the morning. That's on air at KFFT 90.1 FM. It's actually on air. We also do it we also write articles in newspapers. I've written for the Kingwood Observer, the Humble Observer, Atascocita Observer, Houston Chronicle. I have articles in all these different rags. So there is a whole lot that we do to keep that progressive message out. But to continue doing that and getting help for doing it, we need your support. So again, please support us either by subscribing to our channel on YouTube, on Facebook, or becoming a newsletter. There's a whole lot of different ways you can support the program. Anyhow, folks, I got to get out of here. Love you all. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.